Today, we're about to explore the 5 most horrifying revenge deaths ever recorded. From a marina manager watching a man step into a narrow death trap beside a dock to a stagehand sabotaging a high school rally in the most terrifying way possible. It was September 14th, 2019, at a small private marina along the Gulf Coast of Florida. The morning tide had just begun to rise, lifting the moored boats in slow, steady increments. Wooden docks creaked against their pilings as gulls circled overhead. The air was already warm, carrying the scent of salt and diesel. Most slips were quiet at that hour, with only a few early owners walking the planks to check their vessels before the day's heat set in. Oliver Garland, 48, had co-managed the marina for nearly 15 years. He handled maintenance schedules, billing, and dock assignments. Regular clients trusted him, but over the past year, changes in his personal life had begun to surface in subtle ways. His wife, Jessica Garland, 30, had grown distant. She had married Oliver at 23 when he was already established and financially secure. By the time she turned 30, she had begun spending more time around the docks, especially near Slip 27, where Matt Jackson, 28, kept his 38-foot cruiser. Matt was 20 years younger than Oliver and had purchased his boat the previous spring, becoming a frequent presence at the marina. His growing closeness with Jessica soon became noticeable to staff. Oliver discovered their messages in July, and by August, Jessica told him she planned to leave and move in with Matt after filing for divorce. Friends later said Oliver appeared unusually composed during that conversation. Matt followed a predictable routine. On Saturdays, he arrived shortly after 7 a.m. to check his mooring lines and rinse the deck before taking Jessica out on the water. He preferred inspecting the lines himself, often stepping into the narrow space between the hull and dock as the tide shifted. Security footage showed Oliver walking the docks alone before sunrise on September 14th and stopping at Slip 27. By 7:18 a.m., Matt arrived. Jessica followed in her car minutes later. Witnesses recalled her laughing as she walked down the dock toward him. The tide had begun to strengthen, and a larger fishing vessel passing the marina entrance created a moderate wake that rippled inward. Matt stepped into the narrow gap between the dock and hull to check the boat's position. Jessica stood several feet away on the planks. As the wake reached Slip 27, the boat shifted laterally. What would normally have been a restrained movement became a sudden surge inward. The hull pressed sharply toward the dock piling. Matt had no room to step back. The side of the vessel pinned him upright against the wooden structure. Witnesses described hearing a strained shout, followed by the heavy grinding sound of fiberglass against timber. Jessica moved toward him as others on the dock reacted. The pressure lasted only seconds, but the force was immense. When the vessel shifted back with the retreating wake, Matt collapsed onto the planks. Paramedics were called from a nearby station, but upon arrival, the injuries were assessed as immediately fatal. The medical examiner later ruled the cause of death to be traumatic thoracic compression resulting in cardiac arrest. Multiple rib fractures and extensive internal hemorrhage were consistent with crushing between a fixed structure and a heavy vessel. Investigators reviewing dock footage noticed Oliver's early morning presence. Marine safety experts determined the line configuration at Slip 27 had been intentionally adjusted in a manner inconsistent with standard securing practice. The tide schedule for that morning showed predictable lateral force during the incoming surge. When confronted, Oliver did not request an attorney. In a recorded statement, he admitted altering the lines. He told detectives he knew Matt's routine and understood how the boat would respond once the tide strengthened. Said he believed the marina environment would make the death appear accidental. He also acknowledged knowing Jessica would be there to see it. Oliver Garland was charged with first-degree murder. Prosecutors argued that he weaponized his professional knowledge and exploited predictable tidal movement to carry out the act. Jessica later testified regarding the separation and Oliver's reaction. A jury convicted him, and he received a life sentence without parole. But manipulating tides isn't the only way routine can be weaponized. In the next case, a man's predictable morning habit inside his own garage becomes the very mechanism that seals his fate. It was November 12, 2017, in Helena, Montana. A low gray sky hung over the quiet residential block, the temperature hovering just above freezing. Behind a modest single-story home, a detached garage stood about 40 feet from the house, its siding faded by years of winter wind. Inside, tools lined pegboard walls, and a fluorescent bulb cast a pale light over a concrete floor stained by oil and sawdust. Tully Draft, 51, was a contractor known for steady renovation work and reliable routines. For more than 2 decades, he had followed the same pattern. Wake early, organize tools in the garage, start his truck, and head to job sites across Helena. Friends described him as methodical. He parked his 2008 pickup in the same position each night, nose facing the closed garage door, leaving only a few feet between the bumper and the interior wall. Raymond Pike, 52, had once been a close friend. Their relationship fractured after a failed business venture left Raymond owing Tully roughly $8,000. Attempts to collect the debt became heated. A voicemail preserved on Tully's phone captured Raymond's frustration, insisting he was done discussing the money and tired of being pressured. By early November, neighbors reported raised voices during driveway confrontations. Security footage later recovered from a neighboring property showed Raymond entering Tully's detached garage 3 days before November 12th. He remained inside for approximately 17 minutes. He carried no visible tools in or out, and nothing appeared missing afterward. The truck remained parked in its usual spot. Investigators would later determine that a device had been secured within the garage during that visit, concealed above the driver's usual path and designed to activate when the truck moved forward. On the morning of November 12th, Tully entered the garage shortly after 6:30 a.m. He started the engine and allowed it to idle briefly, as he often did in colder months. With the garage door closed, the interior dim, and the wall only a short distance ahead, he shifted into drive and eased the truck forward, moving only a few feet. As the truck rolled forward and made contact with the interior wall, a concealed device above the driver's side released a suspended steel blade that had been secured within the rafters. The weighted metal dropped under gravity, striking through the driver's side window as the vehicle moved. Tempered glass shattered inward. The blade entered the cabin and struck Tully in the chest before the truck fully stopped. A neighbor later reported hearing a dull impact, followed by shattering glass, but assumed something had fallen inside the garage. Several hours passed before a family member arrived and found the garage door still closed. After receiving no response to knocking, emergency services were contacted. Responders forced entry and discovered Tully seated behind the wheel, unresponsive, impaled by a suspended steel blade that had fallen into the driver compartment. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death a penetrating chest injury resulting in catastrophic internal hemorrhage. Crime scene analysis found that a heavy steel blade had been suspended from the garage rafters and positioned above the driver's path. Tool mark comparisons linked mounting hardware recovered at the scene to equipment seized from Raymond Pike's workshop under warrant. Surveillance footage confirmed Raymond's presence inside the garage days earlier, and financial records documented the unresolved debt between the two men, establishing motive and opportunity. The manner of death was ruled homicide. Raymond Pike was charged with first-degree murder. Prosecutors argued the deliberate placement of the suspended blade showed calculated intent, relying on the predictability of Tully's morning routine. During trial, forensic specialists reconstructed the truck's limited forward movement and impact path, demonstrating that even minimal acceleration within the confined space would have produced fatal injury. The jury returned a guilty verdict after deliberation, and Pike was sentenced to life in prison under state guidelines. Some revenge doesn't rely on steel or machinery, just a clear liquid left exactly where someone expects it to be. What looks like relief from the summer heat will quietly begin something far more irreversible. It was August 3rd, 2017, in Topeka, Kansas. The temperature climbed to 92 degrees beneath a cloudless sky. The residential street sat mostly silent, except for the steady hum of cicadas and the occasional passing car. Lawn sprinklers clicked rhythmically across trimmed yards, while heat shimmered above asphalt driveways. Bendix Spink, 42, a delivery driver known for punctuality and strict routine, had been mowing his lawn for more than an hour. He worked in straight, deliberate lines, wearing the same faded blue cap he wore every weekend. Neighbors described him as reserved but polite. For 6 months, tension had grown between Bendix and the man next door, Gareth Lyle, 38. Their conflict centered on repeated complaints Bendix made about vehicles speeding through the neighborhood. Police had responded to verbal disputes between the two at least 3 times. Neighbors later told investigators the arguments had become more frequent and more hostile in the weeks leading up to August. During yard work, Bendix followed a predictable habit. A clear gallon water jug sat on a small table on his shaded porch beside a metal folding chair. Every 20 minutes, he would pause, drink, and return to mowing. The jug was always there. 2 days earlier, Gareth Lyle had purchased antifreeze from a local hardware store. Surveillance footage confirmed the transaction. The product contained ethylene glycol as its active ingredient and, investigators later noted, did not include a detectable bittering agent. Doorbell camera footage captured what happened next. While Bendix worked in the backyard, Gareth approached the porch carrying an identical clear gallon jug. The liquid inside appeared nearly clear, a diluted mixture of antifreeze and water that looked no different from what had been there before. He removed Bendix's original jug and replaced it with the substitute. The exchange took less than 30 seconds. He walked away without hesitation. After finishing the front section of lawn, Bendix returned to the porch. Sweating heavily, he lifted the jug and drank deeply. He paused briefly, as if registering a faint sweetness, then drank again. Ethylene glycol has a mildly sweet taste, something that can easily go unnoticed in extreme heat and dehydration. He set the jug down, wiped his forehead, and resumed mowing along the driveway. Approximately 40 minutes later, early symptoms began. Ethylene glycol initially acts as a central nervous system depressant. The camera footage showed Bendix moving more slowly as he re-entered frame. His steps were uneven. His posture slumped. He gripped the porch railing and attempted to steady himself before reaching for the door. His hands slipped. He collapsed near the welcome mat. A woman walking her dog witnessed the fall and immediately called 911. Paramedics arrived within minutes and transported him to the hospital. He was unresponsive but still breathing, his respiration shallow. In the emergency department, physicians noted unexplained neurological depression and abnormal blood chemistry. Laboratory results revealed a severe high anion gap metabolic acidosis, a hallmark indicator of toxic alcohol ingestion. Toxicology testing confirmed elevated ethylene glycol levels. Despite immediate antidotal therapy and aggressive supportive treatment, the metabolic acidosis progressed. Over the next 24 hours, Bendix's kidney function deteriorated rapidly as toxic metabolites accumulated in his system. Acute renal failure developed within the documented 24 to 72-hour window typical of ethylene glycol poisoning. He remained in critical condition overnight and died the following afternoon from complications of confirmed toxic exposure. Investigators secured the doorbell footage and reconstructed the timeline. Testing of the remaining liquid confirmed ethylene glycol. A search of Gareth Lyle's garage uncovered an opened antifreeze container purchased 2 days earlier, its contents matching the poison in the jug. Prior police reports documenting repeated disputes between the two men, along with the recorded jug exchange, established motive and premeditation. Gareth Lyle was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Prosecutors presented surveillance footage, toxicology findings, and purchase records establishing deliberate poisoning. The jury returned a guilty verdict, and he was sentenced to life in prison under state guidelines. We've got more disturbing revenge tragedies coming up, so hit that subscribe button if you want to see how grudges and retaliation can turn even deadlier in seconds. It was May 21st, 2016, in Savannah, Georgia. Warm air lingered over the historic district as evening settled across brick storefronts and narrow streets. Inside a renovated ballroom near the riverfront, a wedding reception was underway. Decorative string lights traced the perimeter of the dance floor, mounted along waist-high metal railings that separated guests from a slightly raised seating area. The space glowed amber under suspended bulbs, and the hum of conversation blended with music from the DJ's speakers. Cora Velt, 29, had ended a relationship 8 months earlier with Evan Maddox, 31. Friends later told investigators the breakup had not been mutual. Cora had begun planning a new life, distancing herself from Evan and eventually meeting the man she would marry. Evan, according to co-workers and acquaintances, struggled to accept the separation. He appeared calm in public, but continued showing up at places he knew Cora would be. The wedding invitation list did not include his name. 2 days before the reception, Evan visited the venue during business hours. Staff later told investigators he appeared composed and spoke briefly with a coordinator before asking to step into a rear service hallway. Security cameras captured him entering the corridor that led to storage rooms and utility panels servicing the ballroom. He remained out of view for several minutes. When he exited, nothing appeared disturbed. The lights along the railing continued to function normally. By early evening on May 21st, the ballroom was near capacity. The air conditioning maintained a stable indoor temperature despite the humidity outside. Guests stood along the perimeter of the dance floor, some resting their hands on the metal railing while watching. At 7:14 p.m., the couple began their first dance as approximately 30 guests gathered around the floor. Approximately 30 guests formed a loose circle around the floor. Midway through the song, Cora stepped backward. Video footage later showed her reaching her right hand behind her and placing it on the metal rail as she shifted her weight. Within a second, her posture changed. Witnesses stated that her arms stiffened and her body became rigid while in contact with the railing. She did not release her grip. Those nearby initially believed she had lost balance, but it quickly became apparent that she was unresponsive and unable to move. The music continued briefly before being stopped. Her groom moved toward her and attempted to pull her away from the railing. Upon contact, he immediately recoiled and fell backward onto the dance floor, conscious but disoriented. Several guests approached but paused, uncertain whether the railing was still unsafe to touch. Cora remained upright against the railing with sustained muscle contraction, unable to release her grip. Witnesses estimated the contact lasted several seconds before her knees gave way. When the connection ended, she fell directly onto the concrete floor. Staff disconnected power to the lighting circuit, after which guests moved in to assist. Emergency services were called immediately. CPR was initiated and continued by paramedics upon arrival, but no sustained rhythm returned. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be ventricular fibrillation due to electrical exposure. A burn on her palm and irregular circuit readings prompted investigation. The next morning, a forensic electrician examined the lighting system. Investigators found that multiple safety protections had been deliberately bypassed, allowing the metal railing to remain energized while appearing to function normally. The associated breaker had been obstructed, preventing shutdown. Toolmark analysis linked altered wiring to tools recovered from Evan Maddox's vehicle. Surveillance footage placed him in the service corridor within 48 hours of the incident. Investigators concluded the modifications were intentional. The ballroom closed temporarily for remediation. New ground fault protection was installed, bonding corrected, and the affected sub-panel replaced. Evan Maddox was charged with first-degree murder. Prosecutors argued he deliberately disabled multiple electrical safeguards, creating a concealed hazard within the venue. Expert testimony established that the railing remained energized while appearing to function normally. Evan Maddox was charged with first-degree murder. Prosecutors argued he deliberately disabled multiple electrical safeguards, creating a concealed hazard within the venue. Expert testimony established that the railing remained energized while appearing to function normally. A jury convicted him, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Sometimes the setting isn't a home or a ballroom. It's a packed gym filled with hundreds of witnesses, and this time, the danger is elevated high above the crowd. It was October 16, 2015, when a high school pep rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma turned fatal. The gymnasium held more than 400 students. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, reflecting off polished hardwood as music echoed against painted concrete block walls and exposed rafters. Rexel Mund, 17, was a varsity football player known as much for intimidation as athletic skill. Multiple bullying complaints had followed him for 2 years, none resulting in meaningful discipline. He thrived on spectacle, on forcing laughter at someone else's expense. 2 months earlier, he cornered Jonah Hale in the cafeteria, shoved him onto a table, and mocked him while someone filmed. The The video spread within hours. Jonah, 16, was a quiet stage crew volunteer responsible for lighting and equipment. School records documented escalating hostility. 3 days before the rally, Jonah sent a message indicating that Rexel would not be laughing at the event. Due to the gym's high ceiling and suspended lighting grid, the school rented a compact articulating boom lift. The unit relied on 4 hydraulic outriggers secured by steel locking pins. Although the system used sensors to detect extension, elevation could still proceed if a pin appeared engaged but was not fully seated. Manufacturer guidance warned that incomplete engagement could lead to lateral instability under load. Security footage showed Jonah arriving early. Approximately 20 minutes before the rally, cameras captured him kneeling at the rear right outrigger. He shielded his hands from view while working near the stabilization assembly. Investigators later determined the locking pin had been deliberately tampered with prior to elevation, compromising the lift's mechanical stabilization despite appearing engaged. The pin was later recovered near the staging area, bent and marked. Students filled the bleachers shortly after 3. Rexel stepped into the lift basket with 2 other captains. Platform measured roughly 4 by 3 feet, enclosed by a waist-high guardrail. A brief visual check showed all outriggers deployed. From a distance, nothing appeared wrong. The boom arm elevated smoothly to about 8 feet. Music swelled. 2 students recorded from opposite sides of the gym. Rexel raised his arms and leaned back against the rail, hyping the crowd. 1 captain shifted toward him. The combined movement transferred weight toward the compromised stabilizer. Under load, the unsecured outrigger retracted several inches. The base dropped and pivoted. The basket swung violently sideways. Rexel was thrown clear. He fell approximately 8 feet, striking shoulder first before his head hit the hardwood. In the same motion, the destabilized boom arm clipped a suspended lighting bar that had not yet been secured with its secondary safety cable. The bar tore free and fell, striking him across the chest. Staff reached him within seconds. Emergency services arrived within 8 minutes. He never regained consciousness. Surgeons later confirmed fatal blunt force head trauma compounded by severe thoracic injuries from the falling lighting assembly. Inconsistent with accidental mishandling and consistent with deliberate interference prior to loading. Tool residue from stage storage matched markings on the metal. Prosecutors emphasized that disabling a critical stabilization component after reviewing manufacturer warnings demonstrated knowing exposure to a lethal risk in a crowded gym. Surveillance footage established Jonah's exclusive proximity during setup. The text message provided context. Investigators concluded the act was not impulsive sabotage, but a calculated decision to create instability under load. An outcome predictably dangerous, anyone elevated. Jonah Hale was arrested 4 days later and charged with second-degree murder. His defense cited prolonged bullying and emotional distress. Prosecutors presented forensic findings, the altered pin, and the message sent days earlier as evidence of intent. Following proceedings in juvenile court, he was adjudicated delinquent on the reduced charge of second-degree manslaughter and committed to a juvenile facility under state sentencing guidelines. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.